Right, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me, and thank you, Google, for hosting this presentation. Today, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what happened when I decided to open source my book and how you can leverage the same approach to publish your own book. So as Germán mentioned, my name is Francesco Marconi. I'm a media strategist and recently published Live Like Fiction, 30 Days to Become the Author of Your Own Life Story. The book is essentially an interactive guide on how to find purpose, creativity, and inspiration through storytelling. The organizing principle of this book is called engage, because this book is about how to engage with yourself and how to engage with the things around you that inspire you. And it's also the acronym for each of the 6 parts that comprise the book. And those 6 parts are explore your meaning, narrow your goals, generate a plan, anticipate roadblocks, gain persistence, and elevate yourself. So the book is comprised of 6 major sections with 5 mini chapters each. So total 30 mini chapters, 1 for each day of the month. So it's designed to be a month-long program. And these chapters tell you an interesting story of inspiring people, including artists, entrepreneurs, thinkers, authors, and unveil the strategy behind their accomplishments. And finally, each brief section concludes with an interactive exercise so the reader can apply what they just learned or what they just reflected on. So one of the questions that I get the most when I'm presenting my book or talking about it, it's not necessarily about the contents in the book because people end up reading it, but it's more about the process or the approach that I took to publish the book. In fact, someone recently told me that a book is like the new business card. So you need a book in order to transact in the business world. So I want to tell you today how you can write your own book using this methodology that I followed for Live Like Fiction. Before I do that, I just wanted to guide you through how traditional book publishing works. And it's something like this. The author writes a sample or a sample chapter in a proposal, partners with a literary agent who helps the author broker the deal with the publishing house. And then finally, much later, the book is released to the audiences and they read the book. So in this traditional approach, the reader is actually the last person to come into contact with what he just created. And this is a great approach if you're already a well-known person and have a big following. So if you're a former president, a famous chef, an award-winning author, this is great for you. But if you're like me and you're just a regular person, you have to build interest and you have to build an audience before you even think of publishing a book. And that's where a new approach comes handy, which I call iterative approach. And so for my book, I decided to flip the model, start with the audience first, and collect feedback from people that read sort of the genesis of the book, and take those insights to improve it before partnering with a book publisher to amplify distribution. And so this is, for those of you who are familiar with product development techniques like design thinking, that's exactly what I applied here. So I want to share with you today how iterative publish can help turn your ideas into a successful book. And the book or the process starts precisely by creating a proof of concept. So an idea that you can test, receive feedback, and then improve based on that. So the first step, or the first thing to consider when you're developing your own book project is start with purpose. Identifying things that are important to you, something that gives meaning to your life, or an ambition, or a personal goal. In my case, when I was young, I had the dream of one day living in New York City. And so much so that when I was 16, I decided to buy a picture of the New York City skyline, which you see on that picture on the slides, and hang it above my bed. This is my childhood bedroom. And having this picture helped me visualize a goal or an ambition that I had. And eventually, I was fortunate to turn that dream into a reality when I got an internship here in New York City. But when I finally arrived to the city of my dreams, I really didn't know anyone. I was just fresh out of college. I had no professional experience. So my way of coping with the situation was to write my observations of how people behaved, how they did small talk, how they inspired others, how they managed people. And so I started translating these interesting observations that occurred around me into strategies that I could use in my own life. And so those notes, literal notes that I wrote, became the raw material of what eventually became Live Like Fiction. So a few tips here as you're getting started in your book project. Find a personal story that illustrates your journey and make it surprising and authentic. So once you have figured out that your purpose, the second step is essentially to test those ideas at scale. And so a good way of doing that is actually engineer a viral post. It might seem challenging, but if you follow some ideas here, it's not that difficult. So think about it, this viral post, or this summary of what your book you want to accomplish in your book, as a teaser for what you want to develop. And this is important to have early validation, because you will be able to collect feedback and success metrics. For example, how many people shared your article or liked it, or how many views you got. So you can share those metrics with an eventual publisher down the line. So as I mentioned before, I had developed a playbook of strategies from my observations on how to have better communication skills, leadership, influencing people, and decided to take those notes that I handwritten and put them on an online shared document. And then what I did is that I sent it to 10 friends, and I asked them to provide me feedback, and most importantly, to highlight the areas of that article or that blog post that were the most unique, the most compelling. And so I let the audience, although it was a small audience of 10 people initially, participate in the creative process. It's almost like testing your product before it's released to the public. So I invited feedback to help me identify the ingredients in those notes that worked, and then use those to improve the overall narrative of the pilot or the post that would originate the book. So when I finally published online, I used Medium. There are many other platforms. I knew that the version that I had just published was the best version that I could create, because it had a lot of the elements that people had enjoyed and had highlighted as the most unique, the most surprising. And eventually, the blog post became viral. So what happens when you are at this stage, and finally you have your viral blog post, which is almost a teaser for the book? You have an opportunity to build a support community, not only of those 10 initial people that you asked for feedback, but also people who you don't know yet and have enjoyed reading your work. And it's important to connect with these readers, because down the line, they will play a very crucial role in promoting your book once it's out for sale. And in addition to that, you may get lucky and get people you admire to give you feedback and validation. So in my case, journalist Katie Couric and author Neil Strauss shared their appreciation on Twitter. And that was very important to me. And also, when I was discussing it with potential publishers, I used this as a validation for the potential of the book. So the thing to remember here is not to be afraid to reach out to the people that you don't know and that enjoyed your work, because they will play a crucial role in the promotion of the book down the line. The fourth step that I want to share with you is how to amplify your audience. So remember, you have this initial interest around the viral post. You have to extend your 15 minutes of fame by publishing your ideas through different online publications. So in my case, I had that successful blog post on Medium, and I used the engagement metrics. I actually took a screenshot of the metrics, how many views, how many shares, and I sent it to a few online magazines and convinced them to republish my article on their site. So eventually, some of these brands invited me to continue as a contributor, which gave me a fantastic opportunity to get exposure to many more people. So a few tips here as you're looking to expand your audience through different online magazines. It's very important to start with a friendly publisher. Maybe it's a friend you met before, or it's someone who works at those magazines you met at an event. And then once you secure the first publishing partner, then it's much easier to get others, because you already have the validation of some of those brands. And so you have to repeat the process and keep generating interest around your work. All right, so this was the first stage of validating your concept, your book concept, with a potential audience, and then amplify it through different collaborations. Now what? How do you turn that audience and that interest into a book deal? So since my book originated online as a blog, it was important for me to give it some more structure and show publishers that it was much more than a viral post. And so what I did was to find an organizing principle. As I mentioned at the beginning, that organizing principle is ENGAGE, which is an acronym for each section of the book. And this acronym, or this organizing principle, is very important because it helps you summarize the key ideas in your book. In my case, they are related to storytelling, inspiration, creativity, strategy, and so ENGAGE links up to that very well. Finding an acronym is crucial because it makes your work more memorable for your readers, but also it differentiates it from any other books a publisher might be evaluating once you present it to them. All right, so step 6 is very important, particularly in nonfiction books, which is the case of Live Like Fiction, is to make them a more two-sided experience. So not only the reader is going through the stories in the book, but they are also taking action. My approach to find inspiration to turn some of the stories in the book into potential exercises was to actually run offline workshops. And you see a picture there where I'm running a workshop at a local startup community. And so what I did was to turn the offline interactions that I had with people and with participants of those workshops into exercises that I could include in the book. And this can be applied to many other areas. So, in my case, it's a book about strategy and storytelling. If you're writing a book about computer science or programming or marketing, you can find ways of having your readers apply the lessons you're sharing with them. Another important point, if you noticed at the beginning, the book has a very rich design element, and that's crucial because nowadays a book is not just something you read, it's also an object that people want to carry with them. So the design element is as crucial for the success of the book as the content itself. All right, so you have all of this interest, and you have the metrics, and you have an organizing principle, and you package your ideas very firmly. Now you can turn all of those success metrics into a book proposal. And so a book proposal, it's like, or it is a business plan where you have to provide an overview of what you're working on, the audience you're trying to reach, who is your competition, so are there other books out there that are similar to yours, and even a go-to-market strategy. So how are you, once the book is in the bookshelves and in the stores, how do you promote it? And the best analogy that I have for this and for my experience is almost like you have a small startup and you're pitching it to investors. And in this case, the investors are the book publishing companies. Right, so finally, you have gone through this process of building an audience, creating a proposal. You were successful at selling that proposal and identifying a publishing partner. How do you promote the book? And how do you do it in a cost-efficient way? And this was particularly important to me, being cost-efficient and time-efficient, because I have a full-time job. So I took some of the skills that I have in media strategy and applied content and strategy principles to the promotion of the book. So one of the things that is crucial as you're launching the book is to keep your audience interested. Your initial audience, remember, of the people that followed you, that liked your blog post. And a great way to keep that interest is to develop a newsletter. I found that a very simple way of writing newsletters that get a lot of engagement is by setting automatic alerts on Google search for news articles that highlight ideas related to the concepts that you explore in your book. So for example, I had a lot of alerts for things related to storytelling, inspiration, strategy. And then what you do is you curate those articles, you summarize them, and you share them with your following. Newsletters are also very important because they are great tools for running small promotions like giveaways and even asking for favors. So for example, asking for your readers to share a link to Amazon page with their friends or to leave a testimonial on your site and so on. This is one of the few last things that I want to share with you, which is trying to create your book as a multi-format experience. So it started as a written word project, but the reality is audiences want to engage with more visual formats, specifically video. And people want to be entertained and learned along the way. So I used a video automation tool called Wibbits. And essentially what this very simple to use software allows you to do is to summarize the chapters in your book, find related images and package them into very engaging, shareable social videos. So also related to engaging people with different formats of your book, just beyond the print product, I found it very, very powerful to surprise your readers. And so what I did in this case was to develop an augmented reality app where readers can drop inspiring thoughts and their ideas in the book by pointing their phones at the book cover. So it's essentially a virtual book club unlocked through augmented reality. I'm not sure if the video will play, but we can try just so you can see how it looks. So as you've seen, the idea here is not that you need an augmented reality app necessarily, but that you can find interesting ways of engaging your audience and surprise them along the way. So all right, so you have all of these interesting activities. You have a book, you have an augmented reality app, you have videos. What can you do next? Well, you can repeat the process either for other projects, other books, or you can do the same thing for other markets. So in my case, I just published the first international version of Live Like Fiction, which has a different title. It's a Portuguese version, and it followed exactly the same approach. And I will leave you with the trailer that I made to promote the book in Portugal, and then we can have a discussion in Q&A. All right, so thank you.
All right, thank you, Francesco. This was great. So as a reminder, there are microphones on the aisles if you want to ask a question. Just feel free and go ahead and ask. But let me start by asking you, where did the idea of becoming an author just come from?
Yeah, so my initial objective was not to become an author. It just really happened organically. As I mentioned, the first time I moved to New York City, I didn't really know anyone. And so one way of coping with this transition to the professional world was to take notes and see how people behaved. And then in different situations, in social circumstances, professional circumstances, and then translate those ideas into strategies that I could use. And then after initially a few colleagues and friends had the chance to read it and encouraged me to share it wider, and that's where the entire process began. One thing that I would say is that it's very challenging to go through all of it, but once you do it, it becomes very easy to replicate. So hopefully I'll be looking into more projects in the future like this.
Yeah, we too, absolutely. Just in the same line, who's your favorite author?
Well, I have many different authors that I like. I can pinpoint one specifically, but I'm actually reading a very interesting book called "The Invention of News," which traces back, the news industry back to the 1300s, all the way to modern times. So it's very interesting for me, as that's my industry. But I usually read a lot of nonfiction books.
Right, that's very interesting. Well, I do have a question about your book, a few questions about your book. But before, well, you did mention that you wrote a blog post, right? It went viral. So did you ever consider just sticking to writing blog posts or just be a blogger?
No, because the initial goal was to see if I could execute on the strategy of turning something digital into physical. And it was important to me as a personal interest and as a media strategist to try to explore different ways of telling a story, not only through a blog post, but through a physical book, videos, an augmented reality app. And so creating a portfolio of experiences. And again, the most enjoying thing is the process of figuring out how to do it and to learn about new strategies or new technologies and then implement them in the project specifically.
Right. Okay. So now talking about your book in particular, did you originally intend to have the book as an open source book, or did you ever consider having, or maybe following the traditional approach at some point?
No, the initial goal was, if I'm promoting innovation as part of my professional career, and if I'm encouraging new ways of thinking about media strategy, it would be better if if I explore new avenues and new routes to publish content. So I wanted for the process to be to break away from the traditional model and apply a more user-centric approach to writing the book. So putting the audience first rather than last, and then use that initial feedback to improve the book and validate it before it's distributed wider by a publisher.
All right, very innovative indeed.
Thank you.
Do we have a question from the audience? Yes?
Hello. Thanks, Francesco, for coming. You mentioned in your talk how you shared your book and the ideas with a group of 10 people. How did you actually decide who those 10 people should be? Because depending on the composition, that would greatly kind of bias the book one way or another. Were you looking for people who were you knew were a little bit more critical, or people who would just make you feel good, depending on your work?
That's a great question. And specifically, when I was designing this small focus group, I picked friends who I know are very critical. And in fact, the question that I asked was, tell me what's wrong. And after you do that, tell me what you like. And so inviting this feedback and inviting the initial work to be dissected and evaluated by people that I know are very critical was very important to me, because once it goes through that smell test, then and you're able to improve your work based on those interactions, then you're likely going to have something that everyone enjoys. And I also search for people or identified friends and family from different areas. So not only people that work in media or entrepreneurship, but friends that work in the medical field and friends who are artists or teachers. And so trying to have an audience or initial audience that could represent the wider world.
Is 10 a magic number? Was it like 3 friends that like you, 3 friends that didn't like you, and maybe mom, dad?
Yeah, no, it was not a magic number. It was just, I was looking for an initial group of people that could provide some guidance, and it just happened to be 10. But I think that's a good number. I think 5 is too small, and maybe 100 is too big. So something in between.
All right. So aspiring writers and authors, 10 people. Don't forget that. Okay. So now, in the lines of feedback, how did you prepare for not positive feedback? I mean, you, by doing the book as an open source, you probably knew that there was a possibility that some of the feedback that you were going to receive was not necessarily what you wanted to hear or read. So how did you prepare yourself for that?
Yeah, so two main things. So the first thing is that the main objective was to produce a very good product, a very good book. And so if that's the focus, then I could look at feedback as a way of improving and getting close to that vision. And the second point is that you don't have to receive or implement all the feedback you get. So there's a balancing act between the feedback you receive and your own your own direction, your own creative spirit. So you have to be able to manage both of those, and while staying true to your own voice and to what you want to convey in the book that you're writing.
Right. Okay. I have to say that's very courageous of you. I'm not so sure if I would just want to open the things I write to the open net and see what feedback I get. So yeah, good stuff, Francesco.
Thank you.
Very courageous. Okay, so kind of shifting gears a bit. Well, technology is part of your book. It's basically at its core. When did you decide to incorporate technology in your book?
Well, I mean, it's part of my technology is part of my language. It's what I do as in my profession, and so today we have so many tools available to us that can really help us scale our creativity, and this collaboration between humans and machines is something that I'm very passionate about. So I wanted to incorporate technology from day one, and that means using an online shared document to an online platform for sharing blog posts, which in my case was Medium, all the way to using video automation in augmented reality. And as I mentioned, it was a process of exploration, not only of the concept of the book, but what I could do around it and the strategies that I could implement as part of this project.
Right. And then you also mentioned that, well, you have a full-time job. So tell us how you balance that. I mean, did your job in the Associated Press somehow help you achieve what you wanted to achieve with the book or through the process? Just tell us how you balance that, because I think sometimes we all want to do things, but I'm so busy with my job that I just can't find the time for just doing whatever I've been wanting to do for so long. So how did you balance that? How did it work?
Absolutely. So first of all, this was a hobby for me, something that I was very interested in pursuing, and I really enjoyed doing it. And so if that's the case, and if you are doing an enjoyable activity, it becomes much easier when you arrive home after a long day at work and you use it as a way of relaxing, of distracting yourself, and that's what I did. Use this creative process to not only inspire the book, but also inspire my daily life and my profession, because I feel that having a hobby is crucial. Because it's a source of creativity that you can then channel into different areas of your life. And also there's the weekend, which is a great, if you count the number of hours and things that you can accomplish on a weekend, if it's something enjoyable to you, there's a lot of time. Specifically, my work as a media strategist at a large news organization, I get to learn about new technologies, new strategies, and so some of those lessons learned end up playing a role in what you do, or in my case, or what I did outside work. So learning about video automation and learning about how to develop newsletters, how to curate content, it's something that I was exposed to through my work.
Did you ever ask your coworkers for feedback about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we have a very successful internship program. And I was my publisher gave me several copies of the book so we could give it to our interns. And I've also shared some presentations and some ideas specifically about the book with my colleagues, and they have been wonderful at supporting the project, as well as providing feedback, asking questions, and so on.
Again, very courageous of you.
Yeah, yeah.
What advice can you give those future authors that are watching this on YouTube? What's the maybe 3 things you can tell them, or the one thing you can tell them to those who are thinking about, as I said before, start their own project, but maybe they just they think they don't have the time or so? Yeah,
so I think the most important thing is to develop a plan of the steps you want to accomplish and the action items that you have to do or to execute to get to that larger vision. So, for example, in this discussion today, I shared 10 principles that I found important in my journey. I think these are applicable to other people, but each individual will have their own unique way of approaching a book project. But again, if you're able to define a plan and stick to it, eventually you'll see results. And that was important to me because I wanted to give up every single day as I was creating this project, because it's you're getting rejected by publishers, or the feedback is very harsh, or you're not able to create execute on a certain idea that you had. So having that guiding principle and that knowing what the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of your creative process is crucial as you're developing a book project or any media project.
Right. Okay. Well, I have maybe one more question. If the audience has any questions, please approach the mics. Yes, and we have a question. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. I have spoken with a lot of authors, and I work with some of them closely, and I feel a lot of them have gone through this great marathon of creating this work, this item, and they sort of run out of energy when it comes time to self-promote. Some of them expect the publisher to do this, and there's not a lot of resources in publishing these days to really pull that through all the way. What sort of advice would you offer to authors who have gone through the race and are basically, in their mind, finished, but they have a little ways to go into making their books a success? What sort of advice do you have to keep their energy levels up in that self-promotion phase, which I think is just so key that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an excellent question, because I felt what you just described, which is some fatigue after going through all of this effort, and then you still have to promote the book. One thing that I find very energizing, and although I've been talking about how to leverage technology and different marketing tools that are available out there, I found very rewarding to have offline discussions with people and readers and potential readers, because then you get to interact with with people that are just like you, and you get new ideas, and you see how they are enjoying reading it, and that's inspiring. And as I'm writing, or as I was writing this book and any other projects, I always think about one or two people, specific people, friends or people that I met at an event or at a conference, that's my audience. And so I'm thinking about that specific person. I'm thinking about John or Sarah or whoever it might be, and having that in mind of how will they react once this is out. So again, not focusing, of course, on being creative and resourceful in terms of the technology tools you use to market your book, but most importantly, find avenues to interact with people in real life.
Thank you. Okay, Francesco, one last question. What's next? So we know your book is published in Portuguese now. Do you plan to do more versions, perhaps Italian?
Yeah, I would love to do more versions, and looking forward to finding partners and readers in other countries, because the feedback that I've been getting has been very positive, and that's very rewarding. And I would love to share some of the ideas and the creativity with even more people. So hopefully more translated versions in the future.
And any other plans to write more books or other subjects do you have in mind for future books?
Yeah, I have some other ideas, but right now I'm focusing on making this specific project successful, and then I'm sure eventually I'll explore other concepts or other book ideas. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. We definitely appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your ideas with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Google, for hosting me.